I've got to keep these two crystals apart. It's a self-destruct of some sort.
Crystals?
Electrite crystal leads. The mechanism's trying to push them together. Let them touch. Poof! The whole fusion engine.
Tumbling slowly above the blue glimmer of Endor, Luke spotted Wedge's X-Wing. Alongside it drifted a 9-meter-long cylinder bearing Imperial markings, fully as long as the X-Wing and almost all engine, a type of drone ship the Alliance still couldn't afford. For some reason, the drone filled him with foreboding. The Empire never used such antiques anymore for sending messages. Why hadn't the sender been able to use standard Imperial channels? Wedge clung to one end of the cylinder, connected to the X-Wing by a life support tether. He must have blown his cockpit air and dove for the cylinder's master control the moment he realized he'd accidentally armed it to detonate. Even in his pressure suit and closed-face emergency helmet, he couldn't survive vacuum long. Closing in, Luke reversed engines with care. Wedge held one hand inside a hinged panel. That hand must be half crushed. Luke frowned. Sweat trickled on his forehead. If he didn't hurry, his friend was dead. Already, Wedge's sense in the Force wobbled dizzily. Cautiously, Luke slipped his lightsaber into the flare ejection port's feed tube. He launched it out, then extended a hand toward it across 10 meters of vacuum. He sent it gliding toward Wedge. As it neared the target, he twisted his wrist. The green-white blade appeared, silent in the vacuum of space. Wedge's wide brown eyes blinked inside his faceplate. "On my signal, jump free."
Luke, I'll lose fingers.
"Way free," Luke repeated. "You'll lose more than fingers if you stay there." At moments like these, moisture farming for Uncle Owen back on Tatooine didn't sound too bad. "Show me the crystals," said Luke. "Look at them closely."
Okay.
Wedge pulled around to stare into the hatchway. Letting the lightsaber drift, Luke felt for Wedge's friendly presence. Through Wedge's eyes, and fighting the excruciating pain in Wedge's hand, Luke glimpsed a pair of round, multifaceted jewels, one inside his palm, the other crushing inward at the end of a spring mechanism from the back of his hand. Fist-sized, the jewels reflected pale golden sparks of saber light out the hatch onto Wedge's orange suit. If Wedge jumped, Luke would have a second at most to slice one crystal free, and only a little longer before Wedge fainted. "Jump on the count of 3. Jump hard." "1," Luke said. Wedge didn't object. Clenching his teeth, Luke eased into a closer accord with the saber. So long as he focused on the saber, he could maintain control. 2. Keeping up a steady count, he felt the saber, the crystals, and the critical gap, all as parts of the universe's wholeness. 3. Nothing happened. "Jump, Wedge!" Weakly, Wedge launched himself. Luke swept in, one crystal soared free, reflecting a whirling green kaleidoscope onto the X-Wing's upper S-foil. Wedge's body rose and sank with each breath as he floated upright in the fleet's clear tank of healing bacta fluid. Much to Luke's relief, they'd saved all his fingers. A surgical droid named 2-1B had run tests on Luke himself and pronounced a diagnosis of sudden and massive calcification of his structure, of the rare type brought on by severely conductive exposure to electrical and other energy fields. Yesterday, Luke realized, Emperor Palpatine leering as blue-white sparks leapt off his fingertips. Luke had thought he was dying. He was dying. The surgical droid had urged him to rest, but Luke was eager to get to the war room and find out if the drone ship's message had been decoded yet. Besides, his pain had been worse when he'd lost his right hand. Come to think of it, the bionic hand didn't ache. Some bright spot. Large enough to hold 100, the flagship's war room was almost empty. A service droid slid along the curve of an inner bench, passing between a light tube and glimmering white bulkheads. Down near the circular projection table that dominated the war room center, near a single tech on duty, Mon Mothma, the woman who'd founded and who now led the Rebel Alliance, stood with General Crix Madine. Mon Mothma's presence gleamed visibly in her long white robes and invisibly through the Force, and the bearded Madine's confidence had grown since the battle for Endor. They both looked in Luke's direction and frowned. Luke smiled half-heartedly and gripped the handrests of the repulsor chair he'd commandeered out of the medical suite, steering it down the steps toward them.
"You'll never learn, will you?"
General Madine's frown got flatter.
"You belong in sick bay. This time we'll have 2-1B knock you out."
Luke's cheek twitched. "Well, what about that message? Some Imperial commander burned 250,000 credits on that antique drone." A small light projection table at the side lit up, and above it appeared a miniature hologram of Admiral Akbar.